Good morning, everybody. I'm going to give it a few moments till all of our attendees can join the webinar.
Muy buenos días a todos. Vamos a dar un momento para que todos los participantes puedan unirse a la videoconferencia.
Okay, watching the number of attendees is going up. That's great. Got a lot of participation.
Estamos mirando la cantidad de participantes que están entrando a la videoconferencia y se ve muy bien. Tenemos una muy buena cantidad de participantes el día de hoy.
Okay, let's get started. So good morning again, and welcome to this webinar on the California Department of Pesticide Regulations statewide pesticide application notification system. My name is
Bienvenidos una vez más a la reunión del Sistema Estatal de Notificación de Aplicación de Pesticidas.
My name is Lisa Bellin. I'll be facilitating today's meeting, along with support from my colleagues Julia Van Horn and Laura Avina Cortez at Sacramento State's Consensus and Collaboration Program.
El día de hoy nuestra facilitadora es Lisa Ballin junto con sus colegas Julia Van Horn y también la joven Laura Aviña Cortés, que también está aquí participando del Consensus de Sacramento State.
Spanish interpretation is available for this meeting. Our interpreters are Rena Rodriguez and Amelia Rivera with Linguistica Interpreting and Translation. And before we go any further, I'll turn it over to Rena for instructions on accessing the interpretation feature.
Thank you, Lisa. Muy buenos días a todos. Para la reunión del día de hoy vamos a tener interpretación simultánea a través de la reunión. Para participar en la función de interpretación, le invito a que seleccione el icono que parece un mundo abajo de su pantalla si usted está en una computadora. Si usted está usando un teléfono o otro dispositivo como una tableta, sus funciones serán diferentes. Usted seleccionará los tres puntitos que ve en la mano derecha de su pantalla. Después de seleccionar el icono que parece un mundo o la opción de Language Interpretation indicando interpretación del lenguaje, usted entonces va a seleccionar español. Después de que seleccione el español, le invito a que ponga el audio original en silencio o Mute Original Audio para que de esta manera usted pueda escuchar la presentación solamente en su lenguaje de preferencia. A través de la reunión le invitamos a que participe completamente en su lenguaje. Puede someter preguntas, comentarios o hacer comentarios en voz alta en su lenguaje y aquí estaremos para asistir con interpretación. Throughout this meeting, we will be conducting it with simultaneous interpretation. If you are a monolingual English only speaker, we do invite you to select the interpretation function as well. To select interpretation, you are going to select the icon at the bottom of your screen that looks like a world. Once you select the icon, I invite you to select English if this is your language of preference, and everything else you just leave alone and everything will be conducted just as normal. The only difference you will notice is that when we do have any Spanish participants who comment or make questions, you will be able to hear the interpretation of those comments or questions in real time. So, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Rena. Julia will now provide a few instructions on using the Zoom webinar features.
So Rena has already reviewed how to access interpretation. The other features that we have available today for your use are the raise hand function if you should want to participate by sharing a comment verbally. You'll see that in toward the middle of the set of buttons that you have at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So you can just go ahead and press that and we'll go down the list in the order that those were received and allow you to unmute yourself and share your comments. You can also use the Q&A box to submit any questions or comments. And then we have the chat function enabled in such a way that you can chat directly with the panelists. The reason why we have it set up that way is because we would ask you to use the chat only to let us know if you're having any technical difficulties. And that way we can help you out with those. But if you have a comment, we ask that you submit it either using the Q&A box or by raising your hand and sharing it verbally. And on the right side of the screen, you'll see a little example of how the Q&A box looks. You'll just type in at the bottom of your screen in the little box, and you have the option to submit your questions or comments anonymously as well, should you choose to do so.
Thank you, Julia. I'm going to briefly review the agenda now. Today's meeting will begin with opening remarks from DPR's Acting Director, Julie Henderson. We'll then provide a presentation with background information, including a regulatory framework overview, examples of existing pesticide notification systems, input received during focus group meetings held this summer, and a description of guiding principles and practical considerations that DPR has identified to use in the next steps of designing the system. These guiding principles and practical considerations are the focus of today's webinar. We have time set aside in case there are a few questions on the information provided in the presentation, and then we'll dive into the main part of today's meeting, which is to hear your feedback. A few additional notes are that there's a website, listserv, and email that have been set up for this project. And Julia will place the website and listserv sign-up links, as well as the project email in the chat box. The email can be used to provide further input after today's webinar through November 19th. Today's PowerPoint presentation and a recording of the webinar will be posted on the website as soon as possible following the webinars. With that, I'll turn it over to Acting Director Julie Henderson for some opening remarks.
Thanks very much, Lisa. And good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for making the time to be with us today at the webinar and to provide your input into our development of the statewide pesticide application notification system. The Department of Pesticide Regulation, which we refer to as DPR, is one of 6 boards and departments and offices under the California Environmental Protection Agency. Our mission is to protect human health and the environment by fostering sustainable pest management tools and practices and regulating the sales and use of pesticides across the state of California. The Governor, Cal EPA, and DPR are accelerating a transition to safer, more sustainable pest management to improve the health of all Californians and our environment, while continuing to support a strong agricultural economy and our urban environments. In the 2021-22 state budget, DPR received funding for 2 years to bolster existing scientific research and grant programs that promote safer, more sustainable pest management practices, enhance environmental monitoring activities, and continue to strengthen its enforcement and community engagement activities. The state budget also allocated $10 million to DPR to begin the development of a statewide pesticide notification system to provide transparent and equitable access to information to the public about pesticides used around them. That information will provide the public with the opportunity to make their own decisions about any additional precautions they may want to take to protect their health and the health of their families. This webinar is part of a series of public input opportunities to gather input on the design and development of that statewide system. We need input and engagement from all stakeholder groups to design an effective, workable system that reflects the guiding principles we'll share today. Prior to this webinar, we hosted a series of focus groups in August of this year for community residents and groups, regulatory agencies, growers, and regulated industries. The focus group meetings were designed as listening sessions for us to hear stakeholder input on the benefits and challenges of a notification system and design parameters. We'll be covering an overview of the feedback from these focus groups in the webinar today. And as Lisa mentioned, a summary of that feedback is also available on our website. We plan to incorporate the input gathered during this week's webinars and in written comments that follow to inform our next steps in the development of a statewide pesticide notification system. We'll provide another opportunity for feedback early next year at public workshops. We really look forward to your input today on our development of the statewide pesticide application notification system. Thank you so much for participating, and we'll look forward to also accepting additional written comments, as Lisa mentioned, through November 19th. Thanks again, and turning it back over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Director Henderson. I'm going to pass it along to Joshua Ogawa, who's going to give us our opening background presentation.
Great, thank you. Good morning. My name is Joshua Ogawa, and I work in the Enforcement Headquarters Branch for DPR. Developing a statewide notification system is an ambitious project that needs a diversity of thought to make it successful. Today's webinar is an opportunity for providing input early on into shaping this project. We want to hear your thoughts and ideas for what a notification system may look like. For the next few minutes, I will briefly overview how pesticides are regulated in the state, how developing a notification system is an extension of those efforts, and share with you some thoughts and considerations on this project. After that, the focus of this meeting is to hear your thoughts on what principles and practical considerations are needed for the design and development of a notification system. This feedback is invaluable in guiding us through the next steps in the project. So we are just beginning planning for this notification system, which is an important time to hear and incorporate feedback. This year, as mentioned, DPR has allocated approximately $10 million to support the planning and development of the system. Also, as mentioned earlier in the opening remarks, in August, we held community focus groups to inform today's webinars. Your ideas and feedback shared today will help guide workshops, which are planned for early next year. The workshops are smaller discussions which are focused on the more technical and practical aspects of a system. Collectively, all this information will be used to develop and test out potential solutions, which will ultimately lead to launching a pesticide application notification system. And that is where we are headed. Let's look at where we are now and how we can build from it a notification system. DPR plays a vital role in protecting human health and the environment through regulating pesticide sales and use in the state. And when I'm using the term pesticide, it includes any substance that's used to control, destroy, repel a pest. So this includes many different types of products you may be familiar with, including insecticides, herbicides, insect repellents, disinfectants, and sanitizers. Our robust program includes evaluating pesticides before they're sold and used in California, ensuring the safety of public and workers, and enforcing pesticide laws and regulations. Before a pesticide can be used or sold within California, DPR performs a scientific evaluation of pesticide product ingredients and how that pesticide will be used to determine whether there are potential human health or environmental risks. DPR will not register a pesticide product if it doesn't work as intended or if its use would result in significant adverse effects to human health or the environment. Even after registration of a pesticide product, DPR continues to monitor, reevaluate, and address any unforeseen effects on human health and the environment. Several programs are involved in this effort by conducting risk assessments of pesticide active ingredients, exposure monitoring, and investigating and evaluating pesticide illnesses, incidents, and other reported unintended effects. Ensuring that public and workers are protected extends well beyond evaluating the safety of pesticides before they're sold and used in the state. DPR has developed extensive training programs on the safe and legal use of pesticides and provides outreach on pesticide safety to farm worker communities throughout the state through many different ways. This includes print publications available in multiple languages, in-person presentations, as well as radio, television, and other media public service announcements. A vital part of ensuring the protection of the public and workers is fostering the development and use of safer and sustainable pest management tools. One way this is done is through our grants program. In 2021, we made available over $5 million to increase the adoption of integrated pest management practices, or IPM, in agricultural, urban, and wildland settings. IPM is an approach to pest management that uses the least toxic and most effective methods to tackle pest problems. In addition to the scientific evaluation of pesticide products and extensive monitoring, as well as the education about safe pesticide use, it is critical to DPR's mission to ensure pesticide laws and regulations are followed. Under a long-standing and robust legal framework, DPR conducts enforcement in collaboration and partnership with the state's 56 county agricultural commissioners. DPR's role is to create regulations on pesticide sales and use, provide statewide oversight, as well as training and guidance to county agricultural commissioners. Across the state, there are hundreds of county agricultural inspectors enforcing laws and regulations in the communities they live in. County inspectors regularly visit farms and other places where pesticides are used to verify and ensure rules are followed. They also investigate pesticide-related complaints and concerns voiced from their communities. In addition to enforcement, county agricultural commissioners are educators and provide outreach, safety training, and learning opportunities to local growers, field workers, and the public they serve to ensure pesticides are safely and properly used. So I'd like to end this brief overview with a focus on California's Restricted Material Program, which encapsulates or kind of encompasses all three of the general points I've touched on: evaluating pesticides, ensuring both people and the environment are protected, and enforcing safe pesticide use. The department designates certain pesticide active ingredients as restricted materials. Those designations are based on the materials having a greater potential to harm bystanders, farm workers, or the environment, which includes wildlife or domestic animals. Once designated, pesticides which have these active ingredients have additional sales and use restrictions, including growers required to get a permit from the local county agricultural commissioner to allow for the possession and use of those pesticides. Restricted material permits have to be application time and site specific, and often include many additional conditions to further reduce potential adverse effects. The permitting process enables the CAC to more closely assess effects the proposed application may have on health and the environment. The time and site specificity is ensured in many cases through a required notice of intent. This NOI must be submitted to the County Agricultural Commissioner at least 24 hours in advance of an application and describes the site, date, and time of a proposed application. With that overview, California's robust pesticide regulatory system provides a foundation for developing a system to provide transparent and equitable access to information about certain pesticide applications in advance. The purpose of this system will provide information to you about pesticide applications occurring nearby to give you an opportunity to take additional precautions you may want to take to further protect your health. So where do we begin in designing such a system? One way is we can look at existing notification systems in operation across the state. These systems were designed to meet very different goals and needs, so they may not necessarily be a model for a planned notification system. Instead, there is value in examining them to learn lessons and from their successes and their limitations. While there are other systems to look at out there, I'm just going to overview three to give you a general idea of what is out there. The first of three to overview is the California Department of Food and Agriculture's Notice of Treatment, which they issue when they do exotic insect pest control. These notices provide the public with localized information about the why, when, and how a specific exotic pest will be controlled. A feature of these notifications is kind of a multi-notice approach, which includes a more widely distributed public notification of upcoming pest control efforts. And that's followed by much more specific individual notices, which are given to residences where the applications will occur. Information contained in the notices of treatment include a treatment plan, maps of a treated area, a feasible alternatives analysis, and profiles of the exotic pests to be controlled. Another notification system to look at is the soil fumigant notification system in place in Monterey County. This system is a communication network developed in Monterey that provides anyone who signs up information on planned soil fumigant applications near several local school communities. Signing up for the text-based or email notifications can be done through a bilingual website, which a goal of that program is to make it easier for concerned community to find information on pesticide use. Information provided in these notifications include the location, proposed date, as well as the information on the pesticide being applied. A third example of a pesticide application notification system is Beware. Unlike the two previous examples, Beware is an online platform which was tailored to fulfill specific legal requirements between beekeepers and the county agricultural commissioners, as well as between pesticide applicators and beekeepers. Beware is both an apiary registration and notification system, which has a goal to increase the communication between pesticide applicators and beekeepers. Using Beware, beekeepers can provide CACs their registration and colony information, and also pest control advisors, applicators, and growers can log into Beware to identify beekeepers and get their contact information if they manage hives within a mile of certain upcoming applications. So in addition to exploring existing notification systems, we're also actively gathering information from you to help develop this project. As a start in August, we held 4 focus group discussions. I'm going to hand this part of the presentation back to Lisa with Sacramento State's Consensus and Collaboration Program to go over what was heard in those 4 focus group discussions.
Thank you, Joshua. And I just want to mention that the slides will be available on the website following the presentation. Just to repeat that. So in August of this year, we held 4 focus group meetings to obtain initial feedback and input from a variety of stakeholder perspectives. In this presentation, I'll provide a very brief and consolidated overview of the input received at those meetings. A more detailed written summary is available on DPR's website. For the next slide. Stakeholder perspectives at the focus group meetings represented local community members and groups, growers and pest control businesses, and state and local regulators, as well as county agricultural commissioners who will have an enforcement role. Next slide. Each meeting began with a discussion about the benefits and potential challenges to implementing a statewide notification system, followed by brainstorming about system design elements to achieve benefits, overcome potential challenges, and address identified concerns. These design elements included pesticides that should require advance notification, who should receive the notification, and notification timing, information, and delivery method. As I mentioned previously, the following slides present a very brief and consolidated summary. The ideas presented here do not reflect consensus perspectives. We were not seeking consensus in the focus groups, and some recommendations contradict each other. In addition, some ideas may not be practical to implement in this notification system, but are included here to reflect what we heard in the meetings. Next slide, please. We began each focus group discussion by identifying the benefits of a statewide notification system. Participants noted that by providing equitable access to information via the notification system, people in the vicinity of application sites, including vulnerable populations, would have the opportunity to take their own precautionary measures. Next slide, please. In addition, focus group participants expressed that a notification system would create opportunities for other positive outcomes, including improved community education and understanding, building trust through transparency of information, opportunities for enforcement of application requirements, and potentially simplifying compliance efforts by integrating existing requirements with the new statewide system. Next slide, please. Along with the benefits and opportunities of the system, participants identified potential challenges to implementing the system and expressed concerns about the potential for adverse effects. If the statewide system is not integrated and uniform with existing notification requirements, it could create complexities for those required to provide information for the notification, as well as the potential for confusion, notification fatigue, or under alarm if recipients receive multiple notifications. Potential agricultural impacts and concerns included increased time and effort to comply, concerns about the possibility that notification requirements could reduce flexibility related to pesticide application, and the potential for application delays that can impact crops and result in economic costs. It was noted that flexibility in some cases is required to ensure that applications occur during conditions with the lowest potential for off-site migration. Questions were raised about liability for potential economic losses and possible liability associated with recommending precautions to prevent exposure. Next slide, please. Participants also identified challenges to providing equitable access, including lack of technology availability, multiple languages, and potential hesitancy to sign up for government notifications. Concern was expressed about whether there is sufficient funding and agency staffing to fully implement the system. Next slide, please. Once benefits and challenges were identified, the discussion turned to system design parameters. The first of which was which pesticides should be subject to the statewide notification system. As shown on this list, responses to this question ranged from restricted materials with the potential for off-site effects to all pesticides. Next slide, please. The next question was, who should receive notification? And we received many suggestions on this topic, including various approaches to establishing notification zones around application sites. And as shown on the next slide, a number of approaches for determining who within these zones should be notified. Next slide, please. We also received suggestions to provide notification to anyone who requested it, to make the notification information publicly available, and share information with community groups who would assist in disseminating it. Okay. Next slide, please. One more. Thank you. Another important design consideration is notification timing. Participants recommended timeframes ranging from 4 hours to 1 week in advance of an application and share the reasons behind those suggestions. These include regulatory consistency, providing sufficient time for recipients to plan and take precautions, and flexibility for growers. Next slide, please. Regarding information to include on the notification, participants provided many suggestions related to the location, method, and timing of pesticide application. They expressed, next slide, please. They expressed various perspectives on what information to include about the pesticide being applied and its potential exposure effects. They also discussed whether that information should be on the notice itself or referenced in the notice. Next slide. Other suggestions were to provide emergency contact information on the notification and to make sure the information on the notice is provided in the appropriate languages. Next slide. And finally, with regard to how the notification should be delivered, a number of methods and technologies were suggested, as you can see here and on the next slide. With that, I'll turn it back to Joshua to continue his presentation.
Thank you. And what emerged from those four focus listening sessions were several common shared wants and goals for a notification system. We listened and used that feedback to inform a set of project guiding principles. These principles are important because they are the foundation from which to evaluate and judge the success of the project. These values are used to consider and base decisions on throughout the entirety of developing and implementing a statewide notification system. Based on central ideas expressed across all the 4 focus groups, these are 5 guiding principles. Any notification system should protect public health through providing timely information about pesticide applications to enable health protective actions. A notification system must strive to improve equity and transparency through providing equitable access to communities about the pesticides used around them. Any notification system should complement existing regulations which govern the safe and legal use of pesticides. We should prioritize notifications for those pesticide applications that have a greater potential to cause health impacts. And finally, a notification system needs to encourage the regular communication among growers, pesticide applicators, local governments, and nearby communities. So with that, these are the 5 guiding or foundational principles. And now we can start to use these to help us develop and launch an effective system. A way to do that is through identifying elements to consider at different stages in developing this notification system. First off, we do need to consider all feedback and perspectives. Another point to consider is what methods or technologies are the most effective ways to provide a pesticide application notification. Which leads to a third point about how far in advance is practical to provide the community with timely notification. And what information should be included that is useful and meaningful to the recipients. In addition to considering both the how and the content of the notifications, consideration should be made to taking advantage of already available information and resources. And in doing so, any provided notification should minimize duplicating these processes. Our guiding principles are important even well after development, as they form the basis from which to judge a notification system. Items 7 and 8 touch on this, and where consideration must be given to ways to evaluate whether intended goals are being met. And the developed system should be flexible to adapt and evolve over time to better meet goals, as well as to be enhanced to meet new and changing needs. So with that overview and background, I'm going to turn this back to Lisa to see if there are questions about the information presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. So before we begin the listening session, we'd like to just answer any questions about the presentation. These are just clarifying questions about the information. We'll get to your comments on the notification system in the listening session. So I see we've already got a number of raised hands and questions in the Q&A box. So I'm going to call on those people with raised hands to ask your questions. And again, please just questions on the presentation for now. So actually, Julia, I'm not able to, for some reason, allow the people to unmute. Would you be able to help me with that? we have Angel. Thank you, Julia. Go ahead, Angel.
Yes.
You
good
should be
morning.
able to
Yeah,
unmute.
actually, my comment was more actually on the public, was a public comment more than the question on the material presented.
Oh, I'll come back to you then. Thank you for letting me know that. Thank you. Ale? You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Is it Ale?
Ale? Sorry. Ale, are you able to unmute?
Buenas tardes, bueno, perdón, buenos días. Mi pregunta es, está bien elaborado lo que nos están diciendo, ¿verdad? Que se preguntó a la comunidad el sistema que están haciendo, ¿verdad? Pero ¿cuándo? ¿Cuánto tiempo vamos a esperar nosotros para que nos den ese aviso de intención? ¿Para qué año o qué meses, verdad? Esa es mi pregunta, porque lo que estoy escuchando está bien. Falta pues más preguntas, quizás para más comunidades que vivimos cerca de las huertas, que estamos a 1 milla, 2 millas.
Thank you, Joshua. Would you like to answer the question on timing?
Yes, and I can show the current timeline for this. And so currently where we are now is at the public webinars in November, walking through early on next year, early workshops, which are going to look at the individual components. And that's kind of more technical. And then moving on into the next year as well, there's pilot projects followed by rulemaking, which leads to the development of a system in 2023 to 2024. So that's the current timeline. And if others from DPR would like to elaborate.
We'll leave that. I think that answers it. Thank you. Angel or Angel? You're next with the question.
Oh, they were the person you called on previously.
Oh, renamed. Okay. Catherine Dodd.
I put my question in the Q&A box, and I'll just repeat it 3 different times in the presentation so far. You've talked about limiting the notification to affected communities as a principle. Is that your intent, and can that be broadened?
Joshua, do you want to take that, or would you like Director Henderson to help with that one?
Oh, if Director Henderson would like to comment, I can.
I'm sorry, Catherine, would you repeat the question, please?
3 different times during the presentation so far, it was talked about limiting the notifications to affected communities and including as a principle. Is that your intent, and can that be broadened, or are the principles like the commandments?
So I think, as Josh articulated as part of the earlier presentation, part of what we are trying to do is identify guiding principles to help us with the design of the system. And part of what we're asking for today is all of your input onto those guiding principles. So looking forward to feedback. If you think that that is too narrow and believe it should be broadened, we encourage you to share that as part of what we'll get to in the later part of the presentation. We are trying to focus on having the network identify folks who are impacted by applications and focus our efforts on those potential impacts, but look forward to all of your input as part of this webinar today.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have Kathleen and Woody.
Okay. I have some questions that came up when you talked excuse me, talked about DPR doing the enforcement in collaboration with the county agricultural commissioner. I'm unclear, and apparently the ag commissioners and DPR are unclear about the lines of authority and whether actually DPR has authority to get the ag commissioners to effectively implement a notification problem. And I've firsthand seen problems with how that played out in Monterey County with the school notification project. And I could talk at length about that. But I'm just, curious whether there's going to be any process to clarify those lines of authority. And then my other question is kind of related. It's also unclear from the presentation who actually designates chemicals as requiring notices of intent and how that designation occurs. So those are kind of big ifs in this project. If those processes are actually effective, then this will fulfill its goals. But if it's not, if we don't know how they're designated as requiring notification, and we don't really know who has the authority to say that the notification will proceed in the manner decided, it's not going to work. So can you just address those two things?
So I'll start with the latter question about what materials require notices of intent or restricted materials permits. So that's determined and established by law, which chemicals are considered restricted materials that require restricted material permits. And so that's based on going back what I touched on in the presentation about evaluation of those active ingredients that have a potential to cause greater harm to human health in the environment. So pesticide products with those active ingredients that are designated as materials will require a grower to get a permit from a county agricultural commissioner, as well as to fulfill the requirements of sort of time specificity with that notice of intent to apply. The first question about dealing with the authorities around the notification system is, these are all steps in the process of developing a notification system, moving forward to determine those, or not to only to determine those, but to set up a system that fulfills that function.
Josh, and maybe I can just jump in to add to that. Thanks. And thanks for the question. But part of the process is developing a regulation that will implement the requirements of the notification system, and that will guide the efforts across the state.
Thank you. Next, we have Bill Valliard.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, I was curious. It said in the beginning that DPR evaluates the pesticide for registration and looks at possible health issues with the environment and humans. Do you do that all in-house, or do you consult with OEHA or DTSC or anyone else? How is that done?
So I can also throw this out to other people from DPR on this webinar as well. For the data evaluation side, scientists kind of review toxicology and studies from registrants for adverse effects. Non-target effects are looked at, ecotoxicology, endangered species effects, pest protection, plant pathology. I'm going to open this out for others on DPR to chime in on whether how much collaboration is done with outside agencies. For the registration process.
Hi, I'll jump in, Josh, thanks. Thanks for the question, Bill. As some folks may know, there are statutory requirements for the manner in which DPR conducts its evaluations. So there are certain points in the process where DPR will consult with OEHA on evaluations. For example, we just issued a risk management directive for mitigation measures for the pesticide 1,3-D. And part of that consultation that preceded the risk management directive was consulting with OEHA as well as other state agencies. So those consultations are outlined as part of our regulatory process, and there's often also frequent informal consultation with OEHA on various pesticide regulatory matters.
Am I still unmuted?
Yes.
Then how about with US EPA, and how much do you rely upon the evaluation given to you by the pesticide maker, the chemical company, Chevron or whoever? Who does the basic work? And you do your original work like, here's this pesticide, we better start evaluating it, and how many parts per million will cause this and that effect? Or are you relying upon what the industry or not the grower, but the maker does, and possibly EPA?
So I'm gonna take a stab at this, and I don't know if Karen Morrison is available to jump in here, but as part of our registration process, we evaluate studies, all available studies that are present. There's literature searches that are done to review that, and there's also an evaluation of US EPA's registration, which precedes DPR's. Once we register a pesticide, we also engage in a continuous reevaluation process. So if there are additional studies that become available for a particular pesticide, we'll review those to determine if there's additional mitigation measures that are required to protect human health and safety and the safety of the environment.
So it's somewhat analogous to OEHA with Prop 65 chemicals, where they're not sitting there in a lab doing all the research. They evaluate everything else they can, including US EPA's already looked at it. And then if need be, they can ask for more research or information.
Right, Bill. So we do not do our own research. We review existing studies.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's go to the next question. And just a reminder, right now we're looking for questions on the background presentation, just so we can make sure everybody understands that material and we can get set up for the listening session. So let's continue with Maya. Julia, are you able to allow Maya to speak? Thanks.
Hello. Hi, I just had a question about the link that was dropped in the chat. It was for the listserv, and I signed up for a few things. The first time I tried it was for the notification system, and it said file not found. And the second time I clicked the link and tried to sign up for a few that said pesticide, pest stuff, and then also air monitoring. And I got the same file not found error message. Is that going to be live soon? And if so, when? Thank you.
Thank you very much for pointing out that issue. DPR is going to work on fixing that. You should be able to sign up already. So we'll get that fixed as soon as possible. Thanks for letting us know.
Sure.
David? Thanks.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, hi. Yes, first I want to thank you for doing this presentation today. It's very informative. I did want to point out to you when you had an example as some of the projects or notifications, it said Monterey County. I wanted to let the audience know that the pilot program for the Monterey County pesticide notification only extends to the northern part, a small northern part of North Monterey County. It doesn't extend to the southern part or the rest of Monterey County, and I would like to see that extended soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Helen?
Hello. I had a similar question about how you're going to classify affected communities, especially geographically. There's pretty well documented information around the farming safely near schools program in Monterey County that over half the 4,700 users of the website were from outside of the county, sometimes even out of the state of California. So as farmers, we worry about that, of potential systems being abused and being open to harassment, which is already occurring here in Ventura County.
Thank you. Well, let's take that as a comment on the notification system, and if necessary.
Well,
we
I
can
also
bring-
have a
bring back up
question
as a
about
suggestion.
how you're going to classify geographically who gets notified. So that's the question.
Thanks. Yes, that's one of the questions about the notification system that DPR is looking for input on. And when we get to the listening session, we will be taking those kind of questions. So appreciate that input.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So again, we've got a few more minutes on the Q&A session. So if we can make sure to just get all the questions that specifically pertain to the presentation, so we can get to that listening session and get all those kind of the comments that we're getting. So Taylor.
I'm sorry, I don't think I meant to raise my hand.
Oh, no problem.
Sorry.
Thanks so much. No worries. Dan?
Okay, here we go. Hi. Yeah, thank you very much. Good to see you. This is really great. And it's exciting that this is moving forward swiftly. I've got three, and forgive me for missing some parts of the presentation. So these may have been covered, but during the previous conversations, there was definitely discussion about, with regard to what pesticides to include, to make sure that we included those that are known to be especially harmful to biodiversity. And this is kind of following the model that we have for Be Aware, which is not simply danger labeled chemicals or something, but application in sites where it's known that they're going to be harmful to bees. And so I believe in our discussions that was included, and I didn't see it in the presentation, so hopefully that can get added in. I'm sorry if I'm not clear, but I can send more by email. And then there was also discussions, in previous sessions on with regard to ag commissioners, and one person earlier here had expressed concern at giving ag commissioners responsibility for doing the notifications, and that seems like a recipe for creating a lot of variability between counties and over time, and adding to responsibility. And I think in our discussion we had talked about having a system that really centralized that responsibility, so that it was the responsibility of DPR in the state to run the notification system and give the notifications, and thereby actually giving us a better system, and then also taking some of that effort away from the ag commissioner so that they can focus on their other responsibilities better. So just hoping, hopefully I missed those, but if they weren't in the presentation, hopefully we can get those amended back in to reflect the previous conversations.
Okay, and also as a reminder, we have a more complete summary of the focus groups on the website.
Lisa, I'm sorry.
It seems like, oh, go ahead.
Can I just jump in for a second, just to provide this clarification? Dan, thanks for that question. So the purpose of designing the statewide system is to address exactly the point you made, so that we have a consistent system across the state of California. But we do need the partnership with our county ag commissioners to implement that, because they will have a lot of the information that we'll need for the notification system. So we're working through all of that, but just want to emphasize that this is in fact a system that will be designed to provide consistency, but also with partnership of our local ag commissioners.
Okay, great. Well, hopefully we can discuss that more. That sounds good, but the devil's in the details. And so hopefully that's it seems fundamental to the structure of the system and not just kind of an add-on idea. And so hopefully we can talk more about what that actually looks like.
Sure. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you. It seems like we're kind of slipping into some of the kind of comments that we might take on the feedback about the listening session. I'm sorry, about the guiding principles and practical considerations. So if I could, I'm going to just see if we have any other general questions about the presentation in the Q&A box, and then we'll move to the listening session portion. And, you know, if needed, if there's any question, we can get to that as well. So I do see a question in the Q&A box about what methods DPR is using to encourage integrated pest management use by farmers instead of pesticides. Is there a quick answer to that, Josh? Or somebody else from DPR? Is there a quick answer about?
I'll jump in. So we have an IPM branch, integrated pest management branch at DPR. Part of what we do is provide grants for research related to integrated pest management practices. We also have alliance grants that support outreach and education to growers to be able to implement integrated pest management practices. In addition, there was about $20+ million allocated as part of this year's state budget to the University of California Agricultural and Natural Resources Division to support integrated pest management practices. And I would mention one other thing. We have convened at DPR along with the Department of Food and Agriculture, a sustainable pest management work group that is exploring ways in which we can expand and accelerate the adoption of integrated pest management practices.
Thank you, Julie. We also had a question, request for us to let you guys know how many people are participating today. And it looks like we have about 400 and just under 450 attendees. Okay, let's see if there's any, some of these questions are about the system. Maybe just see if there's anything else. Okay. I think we have one question about whether the system applies to ag and non-ag operations, and I believe it's only to agricultural operations, but please correct me, DPR, if I'm wrong. So let's start with the listening session portion of today's meeting. And what we're going to do is that we're going to open up the discussion for feedback and input to help inform DPR's next step in the process, which is designing the notification system. So we'll be asking for your general feedback on guiding principles and practical considerations. And in order to help generate those ideas, we'll put that slide on the guiding principles back on the screen. And for this session, we were intending to provide a few different ways that you could provide your input. We've got a lot of people. As I mentioned, we have over 400 some odd people, and we want to hear as many voices as possible. So there's a number of ways you could provide your input. You can raise your hand and speak your comments as we've been doing so far. You can also submit the comment in the Q&A box. We weren't planning on reading all those out loud in the interest of time in this meeting, but they will all be read and considered by DPR, and they will be reflected in the summary. We're also providing an opportunity for you to send in your written comments. You can send those to the project email address, which is in the chat box, which is projectnotify@cdpr.ca.gov. And comments that we received by November 19th will be reflected in the summary. I also want to note that we're having a second webinar tomorrow evening at 5:30. That webinar will be held in Spanish with English interpretation available. So these are a few different ways to make sure you get your comments in. Also, given the number of people and time constraints, we want to limit the length of each person's verbal comments. So if you could keep it to 1 minute, that would be great. And more lengthy comments could be submitted in the Q&A and in a follow-up email. So with that, I'll call on everybody in the order that your hands are raised, and I hope we can get to everybody. But if we don't, I appreciate your understanding of the time considerations, and I encourage everybody to use all the available options for submitting your comments. I also want to note that we're trying to engage all sectors to provide input to help develop a statewide system that will work across the state for everybody. And we understand that there'll be differing opinions, and we just request that you provide your own suggestions and the reason behind them, and try to avoid commenting on other suggestions. So with that, let's open it up for general feedback on the guiding principles. And the questions that we want to pose to you about these guiding principles are, do you support the guiding principles? Do they provide the right framework for developing the system? Do you have any concerns with the identified principles? And are there perhaps any missing principles? So with that, I will go to the Q&A box. I'm sorry, I will go to the people with raised hands, and we'll allow you to speak. For those of you who joined late, once we call your name, we'll allow you to speak, and then you unmute. I think some people might have had questions about that. And also just a reminder that the chat box is only if you have a technical question. If you have a comment on the system, the guiding principles, please place that in the Q&A box. Okay, so let's go to John Martinez. And one more thing before we begin. This is a listening session where DPR is really here just to listen to your comments and take them all in. We won't be having a kind of back and forth with the question and answers as we did before. Go ahead, John. Thank you. I think you just need to unmute and you should be good to go, John. I'm not hearing, John, I'm going to give you a little while to figure out how to unmute, and perhaps we'll go to Nicole in the interim.
Hi, I had a comment on improving equity and transparency. I believe that the system should provide near field level notifications, just because so that people aren't over notified of different concerns, and that perhaps it should consider variable risk indices based on the distance of different community members from the application site, so that they get a more realistic understanding of what their likely health concerns might be. I also think that the system should consider offering duration estimates of elevated levels of risk, given the high variability in the persistence of these different chemicals, and that many can reside in the environment and be quickly transported to waterways many months down the line, if there hasn't been any runoff events.
Thank you. Appreciate that. John, do you want to see if you can unmute now? Okay, we'll give you a few more minutes to get that unmuted. We'll go to Maria in the meanwhile. Maria Sanchez. Maria, are you able to unmute?
Sí, bueno, buenos días. Soy María Sánchez, coalición de CAPS, madre que trabaja en el campo, tiene 5 hijos. Mi pregunta es, ¿por qué tardarán hasta el 2024 y esperan a que haya más casos de lo que ya han pasado de las enfermedades? Que saben que los 13 químicos a los cuales están hoy en día, en el futuro sería más tarde, en el 2024, porque hoy contamos, para mañana no sabemos. Entonces, me gustaría saber por qué tardarán hasta 2024.
Thank you. As I mentioned right now, we're in the listening session where we're taking all your comments, and we'll take that in as a comment about the urgency to get the system up and running as soon as possible. John, do you want to give it one more try to unmute? Okay, let's go to Cameron. I'm sorry, Karen.
Hi, can you hear me?
Very faintly.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay. I have a number of different questions in the chat. I trust you'll read later. So let me just go to that and try to summarize as quickly as I can here. Sorry. First, I'd like to double with the comment made earlier that the Monterey County notification system is just a small portion of Monterey County that does not affect most of the areas where heavy pesticides are used. And that they don't monitor the air. They took away the air monitoring system in Salinas. So I'm baffled by that and what they really want to study. But one of the questions I can keep coming back to, besides what is being done to improve the current notification prior to the statewide launch in 2024, because we yet live with it. But in regards to the process, as to there's so many different restricted chemicals, like the UCLA report recently in regards to 2.5 mile buffer zone and the cancers caused by that. It listed 13 toxic chemicals, 11 of which have already been banned in over 28 countries. So I'm wondering what the review process is like. Once you approve a chemical, does it come back for revisitation and reconsideration for potential ban at your level, or is that simply put upon the advocates? And the other question I'm asking repeatedly is what research and study has been done in terms of science about the cumulative effects of using multiple pesticides, multiple fumigants and fungicides all at once? Because your typical application may have 3 pesticides, 2 fumigants, and a fungicide. And, you know, there's individual studies about those, but how are they connected and what is the cumulative effect? So I have several questions.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The next commenter is Angel. And just a note, John, if you're not able to unmute, we invite you to put your comment in the Q&A or email us. And I just want to let everybody know that we are taking in and documenting all the comments in the Q&A. So if you have put something in there, don't feel the need to speak it as well, unless you prefer to. We're just trying to provide various ways for people to express their comments, but everything is going to be taken in and reflected in the summary and considered by DPR as they go forward with developing the system. So with that, we'll move to Angel.
Yes, good morning. So just briefly with earlier, I actually do have one question, and that is, what is DPR currently doing to ensure that county ag commissioners will follow DPR's leadership on this notification system, whatever that comes out to be? So that I'm hoping, and I look forward to that clarity. As for the public comment, just again, I'm Angel Garcia with CPR and a community resident in Tulare County. And today, I just want to first stress that the notification system needs to be web-based. It needs to be fully transparent, and it needs to be available to the public. Community residents and the ones that we've been able to connect with are not trying to use this as a way to sort of disrupt any sort of applications, as some sort of erroneous claims have been made publicly. This is a major health concern. And this notification should include other harmful pesticides beyond restricted material pesticides. This system should also be in multiple languages and should have an option to opt in for alerts, either whether that be through email or text or whatever makes more sense for that respective concerned resident. Also, the system should also have maps, graphics, and link to safety data. And another important part of what this notification system should have is at least 72 hours advance notice. Again, this is a health concern, and we, as community residents, myself as a parent of two, want to know, and I have the right to know what pesticides my family might potentially be exposed to. Lastly, we need to establish a community-led working group to also help guide DPR to develop this pesticide notification system. And as mentioned before previously, the 2024 deadline is simply too long. And therefore, the DPR should start a process immediately and can make an immediate step, like asking for implementing the web posting of notices of intent that farmers already file with DPR. So this is, again, a health concern from the community, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. And just a reminder and request for people giving their comments verbally. If you'd like to introduce yourself and the organization you represent, or tell us a little bit about your interests before you give your comment, that's appreciated. So we have Lisa Sori up next.
Hi, yeah, I'm a farmer in Ventura County, and you know, we already report every time we use any of these restricted materials, and so now it seems like we're being asked to report beforehand. And just as a farmer, I try to be very responsible and follow all the rules the best I can. But it's really hard. Like, I don't know exactly where I'm going to be spraying at the beginning of the day, because I don't know, like, the weeds grow, you know, for example, or the bugs come and go. And so we kind of like try to hit it as it comes, because we don't want to be just spraying haphazardly every day wherever. And so I just, from a feasibility standpoint, it's a little difficult to do it on the front end of that. And also I really depend on the EPA and DPR to provide us with the correct information. I mean, I live in these farms, you know, I'm here every day. So if anybody's getting hit with pesticides that could possibly unsafe. It's the farmers. And I really need to be able to trust that the stuff that's coming out, and that if we're using it according to the label, that we are protected. And if that's the case, then I think that's great. That like, I don't understand why it would be unsafe to be using it. And if that's not the case, then that stuff needs to be taken off, or the labels need to be changed. So it seems to me like this whole thing is taking something like that we've already been told is safe to use in this certain way. And now we're kind of spreading the word that it's maybe not safe and people should be worried about it. And I know everybody has different ideas about that, but like that, we depend on that information. And so I guess my point is, if it's safe, like, let us use it the way that we are supposed to use it. And if it's not safe, then don't let us use it. But this seems like total overkill. And also it's just going to put us in some really awkward situations with our neighbors. And just, I'd like to remind everybody that like, we as farmers, we live in this. And so like, we are absolutely concerned about safety. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Sarah? Sarah Henney is next.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, as you said, my name is Sarah Henney. I am here as a veteran public educator from an agricultural center of the state and a parent of a student with special needs who also attended schools in the same agricultural center. And I'm concerned as a community member. I think anyone who's affected by pesticide application, students, school staff, community members, should be able to make informed decisions to keep themselves and their loved ones safe from exposure to harmful pesticides. And especially those in our community who are the most vulnerable, like my daughter. Studies aren't based on people like her, but we are everywhere the most vulnerable. She has a heart condition and a higher baseline risk for childhood cancer. So we need to be keeping that in mind as well. It's impossible to be safe and make informed decisions if we don't have full transparency. So I definitely agree with having a public website that anyone can go to without having to sign up or provide detailed information on where they live. So not limited, but broadened, as you were speaking about before, to see where and when applications are taking place. As somebody who travels to work, I may not be caught by your web of people that should be informed. So I really want to be able to get an alert, sign up by text, or look at a website and be able to see when applications are going to be happening. And in order to plan, if I'm going to take my child out of school or if I'm going to decide to take a day off work, I need 72 hours in advance notice. And this needs to be in multiple languages. We know we live in a multilingual state. It needs to be simple graphics for any layperson to make sense of it. We understand this might take time, but we need to start doing what we can right now, 2024. We don't need it to be perfect right away. We need to do what we can do immediately and then phase in improvements over time. So, many community members are busy like I am. I'm a single parent who works full time. I need to be able to sign up for alerts. And get something on my text on my phone. I get to decide what I want to be informed about instead of you opting in for me. So I need to be able to make that choice as a community member. And so I'm glad we're having this conversation, but I also think that having a community group to support this process, as one of the other speakers said, is very important. So thank you for the listening session, and hope that we can get this done sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Next, we have T. Obaid. We're not able to hear you. I'm not sure if you're speaking yet. I see you're unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Taryn Obaid. I'm with Families Advocating for Chemical and Toxic Safety. And thank you for this opportunity. I want to make a point about what really makes an alert system work, or one component of it. And that would be a guiding principle of urgency towards the long view goal. And what I mean by that is, right now, people are being impacted. They're being impacted with cumulative applications, and they're being impacted with solo applications in terms of health effects, right? But the long view is biodiversity, and whether we're arguably really hurling towards biodiversity collapse. And so if we want to act on both those fronts, we would want to have a system that rolls out iteratively with some of the things that are easiest pieces, like the information that's already collected at a county level, prioritize getting that out kind of in a passive way, and then adding on push functionality for alerts. But also the long view, wrapping this all up in sort of a branding campaign that speaks to we don't want to keep destroying our earth and the long list of creatures that just keep becoming extinct. And, you know, the saying of, when's the last time an insect has ever hit any one of our windshields? The reality is there's
We're not able to hear you again.
more danger going on than the scope that's immediate. Can you hear me now? Okay, are you hearing me now?
Yes, we can now. Sorry, I cut out a little bit before.
Thank you. So I hope that you got my comment about the long view and the larger opportunity, which I think is important if we want to move beyond this, because when this gets launched, we're going to naturally be turning our attention to the next hurdle. And by then, you know, how many more thousands of pests will have become extinct, and how much further will we become closer to biodiversity collapse. So, and then I just want to make one other comment, and that is in the community where I personally live. It's an agricultural community in Sonoma County, and our typography is such that we get the wind blowing. And so I might not live next to a farm, which I actually do, but if I didn't, it's going to be blowing in from miles away because the wind picks up every afternoon at 2 o'clock. So I would please recommend considering wind patterns in typography, as well as geographic location and radius in terms of distance. And I'll submit the rest of my comments in email. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is Mark Weller.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Mark Weller, and I live in Santa Cruz County. I live in the city of Santa Cruz, but that is about 25 miles away from the southern part of Santa Cruz in Watsonville, where almost all of the greatest concern pesticides are applied. And so I did want to address a point brought up earlier by Catherine Dodd concerning DPR's use of the term affected communities. And then Director Henderson said folks who are impacted. And I just want to make sure people understand that the people who are impacted are you know, the immediate people who may be exposed to the pesticides. And, you know, California has a, you know, in my opinion, terrible record compared to most of the rest of the world, at least the industrialized countries in banning or not approving pesticides. There are dozens in European countries that are not allowed, that are applied in huge amounts. In my county, 3/4 of the pesticides applied are banned in at least 6 other countries. So, you know, we do want to know about when, where, what is being applied. And, you know, sometimes the affected communities live far away from the people who could inform them or who are concerned. You might have family members. Well, like me, my son lives in Watsonville, 25 miles away. He's not going to check this stuff. Okay, so I want to let him know when there are pesticides applied near him that might harm him. There are teachers who live right next door to me who work in Watsonville schools, and they may want to know whether the pesticides applied near their school or whether their students are affected. Union organizers may live miles and miles, tens of miles away from their union members, farm workers, for instance, and they may want to know beforehand so they can warn their union members about when pesticides are applied. Medical professionals, I know nurses and doctors want to be able to check to see if their patients who might be exhibiting symptoms that might have something to do with pesticides applied near them. They need to be able to know far away. Scientists who are studying the use and effects of pesticides, I also know would like to know when and where and what pesticides are being applied ahead of time. So, you know, that's one way to think about what affected community means. It's far beyond, you know, the neighbors near the fields. Okay, and a second point about that: pesticides drift for miles at harmful levels. There are numerous scientific studies. Karen Cameron mentioned one earlier. The Fielding School of Public Health just did 2 studies indicating concerns about pesticides that may cause childhood cancers within 2.5 miles of the women when they were pregnant. So look, and then finally, and this, I know this is repeated a number of times, but I have to chime in, there is no need to wait, okay? We can start this process now. It doesn't have to be perfect to begin with, but ag commissioners can web post pesticide warnings in the form of the notices of intent that they already received from the growers. They can do that immediately. This is public, it's public health information. It doesn't require a regulatory process, so DPR should require Ag Commission to do that right now. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take Jane Sellen next, and I'll just let people know who's on deck. After Jane will be Danny. So Jane.
Hi, yes, thanks. Jane Sellen, Californians for Pesticide Reform. Thank you for your presentation and for sharing the feedback you've collected from stakeholders. I'm pleased to note that all stakeholders are in agreement on the basic need to provide notice, and that the guiding principles begin with protecting health and not profits. But I wanted to comment first on the slide entitled, "Who should receive it?" Our position is that any notification should be fully transparent to all. Planned pesticide use should be posted online for all to access. Once public data is made public, DPR or other entities, OEHA, DPH, universities, could turn this public information into appropriate methods of notice. Any system that requires sign up or registration, like the Monterey system, is a non-starter given the reality of those most impacted by pesticide use, who may be unwilling to give their personal information to the government for any number of reasons. Conversations about who should receive notice or how far away from pesticide applications you have to live are inherently limiting and antithetical to what should be the top guiding principle, that public information should be made public. And I'll also note that a recent spike in 1,3-dichloropropene recorded in Shafter was caused by an application that was more than 7 miles away from the air monitor. So field level postings just don't cut it. And my final comment is in regard to which pesticide should be subject to notification requirements. Again, as Mark just said, our position is that NOIs for restricted material pesticide use could be made public now. It doesn't take a regulation to make that happen, and it's no burden on the growers. We're interested in how to expand beyond that baseline. 2 studies released this year and last by UCLA and partners revealed that 13 pesticides are linked to childhood cancers, leukemias, and brain tumors when used within 2.5 miles of pregnant women in any amount. And only 4 of these pesticides are classified as restricted materials. One's no longer registered in California. That leaves 9 cancer-causing pesticides not classified as restricted that can be used in any amount without a permit. 10 of those 13 pesticides are banned in at least 28 other countries. These pesticides must be included. Thank you. We'll be submitting more extensive comments in writing.
Thank you. And just a reminder to everybody, we're also looking for your general feedback on this set of guiding principles that was developed by DPR. And just let us know if you feel these are the correct set of principles, if there's anything missing, or if there's any amendments or concerns with any of these you'd like to make. So with that, let's move to Danny, and then Jay will be after.
Good morning. My name is Danny Daly, and I'm with the Agricultural Council of California, advocating for 15,000 farmers across California. Thank you to the panelists for your time today. Ag Council understands the need to notify those potentially impacted by pesticide applications, but as DPR has mentioned, notification without education may result in fear and confusion. A community education program should also be implemented to communicate the safety of the products used here. Materials approved in California must pass federal approval process and also meet the conservative thresholds of additional scientific review in California's regulatory process. We must move forward being cognizant of the restrictive nature of our state's pesticide regulatory program, and communities must be aware that materials applied in California have levels of safety found nowhere else in the country. Any program should be based on an address-sensitive system that will allow notification to those who request it, but not create fear by extending notification to non-impacted parties. DPR should not extend any requirement that seeks to increase the notification period beyond 24 to 48 hours. Weather conditions change daily and impact application schedules, and an increase in this time would lead to multiple confusing notifications. Further, new procedures should not be expanded beyond restricted use materials. There are also many products that do not pose any health risk whatsoever, such as sunblock materials used on walnuts. Specifying aerial application methods should be part of the criteria, or should not be part of the criteria used for notification. We look forward to working with the department as we move forward, and I thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. We'll have Jay next, who will be followed by Helen.
Okay, good morning. Thank you. My name is Jay Jordan with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. And I just wanted to echo a lot of the comments made about having the top principles be around public health and equity and transparency, which I think are absolutely critical for this effort. And I wanted to also echo some of the comments about having this be a transparent and truly public system that is available online to anyone who needs it, echoing kind of what's being stated in principle number 2. And in addition to that, there should be an option as well for folks to receive alerts through email or text, and that all the notifications should be in multiple languages that include Spanish and Indigenous languages, to kind of get at the importance of equity, transparency, and also the communication aspects of the principles. And also including, the 72-hour notice, which we've heard from a lot of residents that they would appreciate really far in advance notice to be able to protect themselves. And then also wanted to push again on the, really trying to make this process as quick as possible. People have been, I think, waiting for a long, long time for this. So I don't know if that's necessarily a principle, but really trying to, have a sense of urgency around this issue, and acknowledging that these are cumulative impacts that folks are facing, and the longer we wait, the longer there is, uninformed notification happening. And then lastly, I just wanted to also say there should also be, in part, also for principles 2 and 5, ongoing community engagement with those that are impacted, especially, setting up some kind of working group that could help develop the system and also continue with monitoring and evaluating the system directly alongside DPR throughout the entire process, and after even it gets set up. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Helen next, who will be followed by Adam.
Hi, thank you. I think the guiding principles are fine and appropriate. I would just urge that this process be data-driven, moving forward. As a grower here in Ventura County, I can't express the level of fatigue financially, logistically, and just morally that we are experiencing, being antagonized, villainized by entities on this call in our community and around the state and country. As was stated by a colleague of mine, a fellow grower here in Ventura County earlier, we are beholden to the organic and conventional products that are provided to us by the marketplace. And they are not erroneous claims of us getting harassed. We have had people trespass on properties even when we've applied organic materials because they've applied as beekeepers to get notified. This antagonism needs to stop as this process moves forward. And we really just need to look at the science, the appropriateness of who is notified and when. And I really just encourage all entities and stakeholders involved to stop demonizing the farmers and apply pressure toward the research that's being done about the effects of these pesticides. Really looking at the effect of legacy pesticides, which we are no longer using, but are still kicked up during wind events and soil disturbance, and become allies with growers as we move forward in this process instead of demonizing us, because what will happen is small family-owned farms or medium-sized farms, which is most of California, will not be able to function anymore economically, and hyper-consolidation will continue, and some of these dynamics and situations will just get even worse. So that's my comment, and I'll provide more in writing going down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Adam next, who will be followed by Miriam.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Adam Borchard. I'm speaking today on behalf of the California Fresh Fruit Association, also known as CFFA. CFFA is generally supportive of the 5 guiding principles. California has decades of experience in implementing some of the most stringent and rigorously vetted pesticide application requirements in the country and the world. Education based on best available science and data should be part and parcel with any notification program so as to prevent unnecessary and unwarranted fear and confusion. Education is key to improving the public's awareness of the safety of the materials used in California. I have several specific concepts for your consideration today. 1, notification should be provided for restricted use materials only. There is no valid scientific reasoning to notify beyond restricted use materials. 2nd, notification should not depend on application methods. And 3rd, notification should not exceed the typical 24 to 48-hour time period due to changing weather conditions. This practice is common with existing local notification programs, such as for schools. If the time frame is extended, multiple notifications could occur, thus creating further confusion. CFFA should also supports DPR's efforts to conduct pilot projects to determine best practices for a notification program. Local residents should be able to be made aware when restricted use products are applied. While unsolicited notification could result in unneeded concern, notification based on an opt-in system is more appropriate so that interested individuals within a nearby radius are notified. Importantly, any state program should emphasize and focus on notification to immediately adjacent neighbors. These Californians are the residents to whom such a notification program would be most applicable due to their proximity. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Miriam, who will be followed by LA.
Hi, can I be heard now?
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to start by, I know that I've missed the Q&A section because I wasn't called on. So I'm going to state my first comment as a question, knowing that it gets recorded as a question because it was ignored earlier. So I had a question during the first portion about the interim plan, given the extensive timeline for the regulatory process that puts this plan not enacted until 2024. So that was my question. I know it won't be answered now, but I encourage DPR moving forward to actually articulate an interim plan. You've heard many different suggestions right now regarding the posting of existing NOIs. And I encourage DPR to be talking about both their long-term plan, which is 2024, and an interim plan that provides the protections needed right now. So apologies, I missed also introducing myself. I'm Miriam Martkin-Ellman. I'm a scientist with the Natural Resources Defense Council. So now I have some specific comments and guidelines based on these guiding principles. One, I'll make the comment that this process is currently out of step with the guiding principles that you put forward. So that needs to be rectified because your first guiding principle has to do with timely information, but your plan is not to enact a notification system until 2024. So you're already out of sync with your guiding principles, and that needs to be corrected. Secondly, some of these guiding principles need to be clarified and made more specific so that they are actually in line with what the public needs. And you've heard many comments to that effect. I'm going to make some very specific wording suggestions to that effect. So for guiding principle number 2, you're using the language equitable access to communities about the pesticides used around them. You have heard many different explanations today about why proximity is an incomplete metric for being impacted by pesticides. There's no reason to put that in your guiding principles, something that relates to a designation of proximity when we know that communities are impacted at great distances. That language should say something to the effect of pesticides used that impact them, not around them. Guiding principle number 4 says prioritize pesticide applications that have greater potential to cause health impacts. What should be added to that sentence is based on the best available science. That designation of cause health impacts should not be based on regulatory determinations, such as the classification of a restricted material. Lastly, in terms of the guiding principle around encouraging communication, should be amended to include engagement. I like the language that Jay used from Leadership Council, though I would have said accountability. Either one works in my view, encourages communication and accountability or encourages communication and engagement. Communication is only a portion of what is sought from a guiding principle perspective. I also want to make the suggestion that the list in guiding principle number 5 include DPR, which it currently does not. Any guiding principle around such a plan talking about communication and accountability and engagement should not only include the local government, nearby communities, regulatory, but also DPR. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Ale next, will be followed by Michelle. Ale, I think you just need to unmute and you'll be set to go.
Ok, buenos días. Ok, buenos días a todos. Yo pienso que de todo esto soy del grupo CAP de Familias Unidas de Cáncer Orosi del condado de Tulare. Yo estoy muy preocupada por todo lo que está pasando por los químicos, ¿verdad? Tengo un niño autista y nos dicen que puede ser por los químicos porque yo trabajé embarazada en el campo. Yo no es que no queramos que las personas que cultivan no dejen de cultivar, porque también la mayoría de nosotros somos personas que trabajamos ahí. Simplemente queremos que se hagan notificaciones transparentes y que nos lleguen a nosotros. Ahorita estoy oyendo que en el 2004, en 2014, perdón, van a hacer las notificaciones a los pilotos, a las primeras comunidades piloto. Entonces, ¿cuándo le va a tocar a mi comunidad de Orosi Cutler? ¿Cuándo le va a tocar a mi condado de que notifiquen? ¿Cuántos años, cuántos siglos, por decir así? Yo quisiera saber por qué, porque para mí es importante que si yo vivo cerca o personas de la tercera edad o niños enfermos, saber para tomar las precauciones adecuadas, cosas que podamos hacer para evitar que no nos contamine tanto el químico o nos haga daño. Sí está bien que protejamos a las abejas y todo eso, pero también nosotros nos gustaría saber que hubiera algo transparente para las comunidades que estamos muy alejadas de los lugares donde se va a hacer los pilotos o comunidades que en verdad nos afecta todo esto. Ese es mi sentir y mi forma de ver las cosas, de todo lo que estoy escuchando. Todos están hablando muy bien. Su sistema que ustedes nos presentaron al principio está bien, pero queremos acción, queremos algo que sea pronto. ¿Por qué? Porque como dicen muchos, ¿cuánto tiempo más va a pasar para que nos notifiquen? ¿O cuánto tiempo va a pasar para que se haga este cambio, verdad? Y como les decía, no es que no queremos que cultiven, al contrario, pero que sí tengan la precaución para todas estas personas que trabajamos en el campo y que somos madres que vamos a trabajar embarazadas y nuestros fetos se están enfermando. Es triste saber cuando te dice el doctor, tu hijo tiene una condición especial y tú no sabes por qué. Entonces, a mí esto me ha llamado la atención más por mi hijo y porque cerca de la escuela de mi hijo sprayean. Son las 8 de la mañana y anda la máquina sprayando. Entonces, sí nos gustaría que nos notificaran simplemente para la escuela para que le digan, oiga, no dejen salir a los niños porque están sprayando. Son cosas que yo sé que quizás muchos de ustedes no nos entienden a nuestras madres que tenemos a un niño enfermo con una condición especial. Ahora todo lo que se está diciendo que hubo una escuela, una universidad que se estudió que provocan los químicos. No queremos también que digan, ay, pues se asusta uno, se alarma, pero sí nos gustaría que nos dieran una notificación de intensidad en la web pronto, que sea transparente, que como decía la muchacha, si hay que cambiar la etiqueta o hay que hacer algo, pues ver la forma de que las personas que estamos más al tiempo del cultivo, o sea, que nos avisen, y el tiempo tarda mucho. Entonces, si apenas lo van a hacer en piloto, ahora, ¿cuándo? Les digo, ¿cuándo me va a tocar a mí como mi comunidad? Una comunidad pequeña de Orosi Cutler, ¿cuándo? Del condado de Tulare. Entonces yo es mi forma de sentir hacia ustedes, que sea pronto, que sea transparente, que no lo pongan en la web en cualquier idioma, porque hay español, inglés, francés, etc. O también hay personas que hablan dialectos. Entonces para mí es importante que esto sea pronto y notificado transparentemente. Entonces no estoy en contra de que no echen los químicos en los files, quizás sirve para algo, ¿verdad? Pero también que nos notifiquen, porque también nosotros nos estamos enfermando, nosotros también nos está haciendo daño. Ahora esos químicos viajan kilómetros. Ustedes que están en esas oficinas también llevan esos químicos a sus casas, a sus hijos. Entonces eso es algo que debemos de pensar en un futuro de nosotros mismos como familias, como seres humanos y para nuestros hijos que son el futuro de mañana. Gracias.
Thank you. We have Michelle up next, followed by Larry.
Hi, my name is Michelle McManus. I live out, I'm a farmer and I live in the community we farm in and my office is on the farm where we farm, and these changes are coming and I'd like to address the guideline principle number 2. improves equity and transparency to access to communities about the pesticide used around them. I think that if that is important, it should be for the access should be for field application for pesticide used around them. I don't think it's necessary to have a system that notifies people that are in San Francisco or anywhere else, just for our local applications. And the notification of 24 hours, if depending on what the chemicals are and everything, anything more than that would be duplication of information. Weather's changed things. There's the windows of applications and restrictions, and anything more than 24 hours would be very difficult. I appreciate you listening to my comments, and thank you very much.
Thank you. And just a reminder, we've got about 20 people with raised hands and about 35 minutes left. So if it's possible, just request to everybody keep their comments about a minute if possible. Appreciate it. So Larry is up next, who will be followed by Hannah.
Good morning. My name is Larry Jacobs. Just a thought that I'd like to add to the conversation to make the system a little simpler would be to exclude the USDA certified organic growers just by their certification and their audits from independent certifiers are not using any hard materials in their control programs. And I'd like that to be considered in the conversation about which materials are required for the notification, but just group the certified organic growers out of the system so they're not included in the requirement for the notification because of the kinds of materials they do use. Thank you.
Thank you. Hannah, you're up. We'll be followed by Horatio.
Right. Great. Thank you. My name is Hannah Bay. I'm the Executive Director of the San Diego County Farm Bureau. This proposal is unfairly targeting California family farmers while needlessly encouraging anti-agricultural rhetoric from urban areas that do not understand the reality of food production. This notification proposal will further collapse the agriculture in the state, which has already experienced a loss of 500,000 acres of agriculture in less than a decade. San Diego County is the poster child of urban agriculture interface issues that drive farms out of business. Our annual crop report just showed our county lost 10,000 acres of production ag in 1 year, 4% of all production in the county. Neighbors call authorities when we're not even spraying pesticides. It could be tilling dirt or normal dust. The general public does not understand the complexities of the agricultural industry. This notification system is going to further confuse the public while driving farms out of state. California farmers do not manufacture these pesticides. California farmers do not permit and perform safety testing on these pesticides. Yet our California government is now telling our industry that farmers are responsible to the public to explain why and how these products are used. Pesticides are an imperative part of agriculture, and without them, our industry will collapse. Widespread crop loss will occur. The state cannot continue to remove the tools from the toolbox of the farmer and expect this state to remain a global leader in agriculture. Instead of a notification system, public education efforts should be conducted by the regulatory entities to help the public understand that agricultural operators are legally applying these products and that these products undergo rigorous review, testing, and permitting and determined safe for use by the state. Instead of picking on the farmers, the agencies leading this effort should be standing up to the public and explaining the robust and expansive process that all pesticides undergo before being able to apply by the farmer. California has the strictest regulatory structure for agriculture in the nation. We also have one of the fastest collapsing agricultural economies in the world. This collapse is directly related to bad policies and plans that are not comprehensively analyzing and placing burdens on the responsibility of farmers for issues that are out of our control. We don't need more greenwash policy proposals that further collapse our food supply and exacerbate our climate crisis by decimating California agriculture through overregulation. Please don't implement this system. The indirect impacts of the proposal are significant and the cumulative impacts are not being addressed or evaluated. Thank you.
Thank you. Asha, you're up. Who'll be followed by Dan. And if I could make a request, if anybody's already had a chance to give some comments, if you could hold off on raising your hand until everybody's had a chance to give their first ones.
I think we might have missed Horacia. So should we do that
Oh,
first and then Asha?
I apologize. Thank you, Julia, for pointing that out. I did.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, this is Horacio from San Gerardo Cooperative. We are surrounded 360 degrees by agriculture. And we don't get notified by the farmers when they spray. They put the rigs and the wind brings all the drift into the community. The helicopters, they come and all the pesticides come into the community. We have already 6 people die of cancer. We have 2 that are having chemotherapy. We have a child care center with little kids of migrant farm workers that work for the farmers. And there's no way of protecting ourselves because neither the agriculture commissioner or DPR or the farmers are informing when they're going to spray. And they owe to the farm workers many years of this disgrace that they're doing with our health. This program should be implemented 30 years ago, and you still need more time. Pesticides kill. I'm a farmer also. They kill, you know. If you spray a human person with a pesticide, you can kill it, or you can send them to the hospital. So this is serious. You know, we are destroying. One of the reasons that many acreage are getting out of production is because we are overexploiting our water resources. We're also polluting our water with pesticides and fertilizers. So we need to protect the public. We need to protect the environment. Otherwise, these pesticides are degrading our soil, are degrading our air, are degrading the health of the public, especially communities that are surrounded by agriculture fields. So you need to act. If you cannot put a system, then the farmers, they need to notify to every community that is close to their fields when they're going to spray and what they're going to spray, because otherwise, how are we going to get protected from their pesticide that is drifted into our communities? So,
Thank you.
Okay.
If there was one thought you wanted to finish up, didn't mean to cut you off.
We need to produce food, but we need to produce it safely, and we need to protect the public. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Asha up next, who will be followed by Dan.
Hi, this is Asha Sharma, Organizing Co-Director with Pesticide Action Network. I'm commenting today in strong support of the guiding principles of improving equity and transparency and also public health. There are a number of steps that DPR could take to uphold these guiding principles and best protect communities most affected by the overuse of pesticides in California. PAN strongly encourages DPR to adopt the following: to create a fully transparent web-based system available to all without signups, sharing our information or where we live. Many folks have shared examples of why
They would want information of pesticides sprayed in other locations. Maybe they work by an ag field. They want information about exposure by their child's school, or maybe they're an undocumented farm worker and don't want to share their information with a government agency while there's such aggressive deportation policies in the US. Therefore, as recommended by Miriam at NRDC, the equity principles should remove the quote around them language. Secondly, DPR should phase in parts of the system rather than waiting years, and begin immediately with posting notices of intent. Third, notify about other harmful pesticides beyond restricted ones, including Prop 65, Beware, and others identified by scientists. If bees can get protected by pesticides, human beings should receive the same treatment. Post notification information in multiple languages, including Spanish and commonly spoken indigenous languages in farm worker communities, and also create an opt-in alert system through email or text. Also include at least 72-hour advance notice so folks can take steps to protect themselves. And lastly, establish a community-led working group that would develop the pesticide notification system alongside DPR. As mentioned, I think this really applies to the encourages communication guiding principles that I agree should also be amended to include accountability or engagement. I hope DPR seriously considers these points, especially considering the commitment to equity mentioned. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Dan will be followed by Sarah.
Hi, thanks for the chance to comment. This is Dan Gleasenkamp speaking on behalf of the California Institute for Biodiversity. And quickly speaking as an ex-San Diego farmer, I'm excited about this as part of really a pro-ag push. This is part of an ongoing push for shared change toward improving California with sustainable agriculture. So this is a painful part, but an important part. On behalf of CIB, I want to say that we support the Principios Guías. They're great with the changes that have been recommended in this call, but we do feel that they are incomplete. DPR's mission is to protect human health and the environment, and increasingly we're seeing that biodiversity and environmental impacts are quite significant. They're increasing. And really, to be honest, they were part of why we advocated for this program and this funding and why the legislature approved the funding. So I do hope that we can please update these principios to reflect that other 50% of the DPR mission in the environment and biodiversity, and specifically see them prioritize biodiversity and environment alongside the very important human health and equity considerations. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, you're up. He'll be followed by Mariana.
Hi, thank you. My name is Sarah. I've worked in agriculture as a pesticide safety educator, a grower, as a researcher, and I've learned and worked throughout the state of California in agricultural communities. So I care about the safety of our community members, our environment, our food supply, our food security, and our food safety. I appreciate the opportunity that DPR has made for us all to comment by the public, the advocacy groups, and others in the ag industry. And I've heard a lot of great input today from all sides. So while I believe in and practice reduced pesticide use, I also understand that they are necessary as a last resort at times. I've learned that in order to be able to farm in organic or conventional systems and bring to market marketable fruit or vegetables that meet the consumer's high expectations, and so for growers to stay in business, there's a need for pesticides. So when I apply pesticides, I choose to use maximum PPE to protect myself, to mitigate risk. So I agree that protection of pesticide applicators, farm labor, and the public is important. But I'm concerned that we will create a notification system that might create more work for growers, enforcement, and the public, but that won't necessarily protect the public. I'd like to echo the concern about the reduced flexibility for growers and the impact this would have on their IPM programs. So key principles of an IPM or integrated pest management program are waiting to spray until absolutely necessary. The more advanced notification required, the less flexibility that a grower will have. And I would predict that many growers would go back to preventative sprays, lower spray thresholds, and calendar sprays rather than practicing true IPM. So this would be true for both smaller and larger growers. It seems like in this system, you may be notified, but there will be more pesticides in the environment that you'll be exposed to. Without the system of notification, you might not be notified, but there'll be less pesticides in the environment. So it creates this regulatory burden. And while large corporate farms have the capacity to do this, smaller farmers won't. I agree that there needs to be constant research done to ensure pesticides are safe and what their cumulative effects are. A look at those pesticides listed in the UCLA study and how we're using those. But this notification, the more notification people want over a broader area and with more notification, they're going to get notifications every day. There's a lot of pesticides out there. And so I'm not sure that this won't cause notification fatigue. And then with that, are we providing advice on how to protect ourselves? So you're notifying people, but how do they protect themselves? I think that to make this useful, it prioritizes highly toxic pesticides, high-risk application methods like aerial applications, volatile pesticides that are more likely to move off-site. But it should be available in all languages, literacy, and for all people, regardless of their technology capabilities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mariana and Kathleen and Woody, you're on deck.
Good morning. My name is Mariana and I am the Tulare County Deputy Agriculture Commissioner. And I just want to say, part of our statement for our mission statement for the county is to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. So I agree with Angel on saying that 2024 is a long time to make this happen. But I think that DPR is overthinking and analyzing it. I think because we already know the information of the notice of intents, it's being entered by CACs on CalAg permits, that they could just post it on a state website, the whole exported Excel spreadsheet now, and allow those interested parties to look at it, without needing texts or emails or door hangers. If you post it online, it would be public, broad, all inclusive, and anonymously able to be reached. I know for myself, when I want to know about, say, the registered sex offender post, it doesn't get me a text message that someone moved to my neighborhood. I go to the website because I care about wanting to know that. And, you can add the maps like they asked for and details to see how close it is to you. Some counties require 48-hour notice of intents, some 24 hours, or like Tulare County, it's by 4 p.m. the day prior. And that's written in 3 CCR 6434 that the county can do less than 24 hours if it's not necessary to adequately evaluate, or if there's a pest control problem of nature, we can improve it. So as of right now in regulation, we couldn't post it 72 hours in advance unless the grower had submitted to us early, like, they sometimes do. Also, counties have the discretion to allow up to 4 days if there's weather or failure of equipment to start the application. And even if they start the application today, it doesn't mean it's going to finish today. It could take days to finish that application. And you only had to submit one notice of intent. And also keep in mind, most pesticides used in agriculture are not restricted materials. So no NOIs are required for those pesticide applications. Also, no permits are required for pesticides used in buildings by structural pest control operators, maintenance gardeners, household use, or school custodians. So a lot of pesticides, this would only cover 1% of the actual pesticides being used. And then we currently don't have authority to require any additional notifications of any of those applicators. And I'd like to also mention, I know someone said something about organic growers to exclude them. If in fact regulation gets changed to include all pesticide notifications, I would say not to exclude organic growers because they still use pesticides that require respiratory protection. And so there could still be an impact to people around their pesticide applications as well.
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you, appreciate it. And if everybody sticks to just about a minute, well, I think we'll be able to fit everybody in through the end. And a reminder, if there's more detailed comments you want to submit, please feel free to just give us an overview and put the more detailed comments in chat or, I'm sorry, in the Q&A or by email. So with that, Kathleen and Woody are next, and Susan will be on deck.
Thank you. So I live in a community of seniors that's surrounded by fields, but I also, before I moved back to California, I did graduate studies at the University of Washington in occupational and environmental health and worked on.
You're muted.
Okay. Am I unmuted now? There's my picture. Okay, yes. So before I came back to California and worked as a school nurse here in Watsonville, where we're surrounded by fields, I lived in an agricultural community in Eastern Washington. And as a graduate student at UW, I studied exposure assessment and worked on some exposure assessments of kids who lived in the orchards. And I just want to remind us, and when we talk about drift and we talk about buffers, that there are a lot of ways that pesticides drift. And it's not just the air, it's not just the 1/4 mile or even the 2.5 miles. We've got our dust, we've got our water, we've got our take-home exposures. So when we look at just notifying neighbors, we're not really notifying all that are impacted. With regard to the health effects of pesticides, the science is always changing. And pesticides that were considered perfectly safe years ago are now considered, now have been banned. But sometimes that takes a long time. And methyl bromide and chlorpyrifos are 2 examples of how long it takes to get harmful pesticides off the use list. And I think that people need to understand that pesticides are not research like medications are, that the human studies often emerge only after, or the human effects emerge only after the pesticides have been in use. And we're just learning that levels that we thought were safe may not be safe. I'm really sad to hear that farmers feel pressure and harassment and all that from this proposal. I think, you know, for me, the project of notification is just a step in this transformation of California agriculture to being less chemically dependent. And I think farmers really support that, and that we need to work together to figure out how that's going to happen. And it needs to involve workers and the neighbors. And we just need to understand that true IPM is not choosing which chemical to use. True IPM starts with biodiversity, and to work toward restoring that biodiversity so that more small farms can prosper. And you know, I just really would like to see more communication and collaboration between some of these farmers that are raising some good points and our community of people who are concerned about our own exposure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Susan, you're up. Kristen, you're on deck.
Hi, my name is Susan Jen Fish. Could you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm a public health consultant specializing in pesticide toxicity and safer alternatives. I'd like to respond to the comment made by one of the farmers. She brought up a few very key points that have been reiterated by some of the other farmers and representatives of farming industry, that the farmers are getting the highest exposure when spraying. I totally agree. Farmers already provide notification of what is being used. And third, it's her understanding that the pesticides that she is using when applied as labeled is safe. And then fourth, notifications to neighbors would cause confusion that they may be in danger. And she doesn't understand that because she's being told that these are safe, being applied as labeled. And then fifth, if pesticides are not safe, then either take them off the market or relabel them. Okay, so I'd like to respond to her concerns. I think perhaps the monthly pesticide use reports that are already being submitted to the local county Department of Ag should be posted online with some automated statistics as to how much of these pesticides were used and where and the target pest, et cetera. However, I want to respond to the farmers that these pesticide use reports that you're already submitting are only showing what has been applied in the past. And the notification program that's being discussed now is trying to create a alert system for pesticides that will be used in order to provide opportunity for the community to take cover. Okay, now my second response is the term that was used, safe. This term is really vague and does not precisely describe the actual numerous aspects that contribute to something increasing or decreasing safety. For example, every pesticide product is required to have a label, as you know, and on that label, a signal word is required. This signal word, most applicators and even Department of Ag staff I've worked with in the past 2 decades are not aware what that signal word on the label really means. It only applies to acute toxicity meaning immediate harm. The US EPA that has required the labeling has not required chronic toxicity information on the label. So when I say chronic toxicity, that means on the label, there's no requirement that, that it addresses toxicity that may occur years or even decades later and even over generations. This could include, as stated by the California State Public Health Program about 10 years ago, they listed asthma, skin eye problems, learning disabilities, cancer, and birth defects. So I hope that
I could ask you to wrap up.
Okay, sure. So I hope that particularly the smaller farmers who spray themselves become informed with the high rate of chronic illnesses among spraying farmers, including non-Hodgkin lymphoma cancer, and turn to a more sustainable and safer means of farming for themselves, the community, and the environment. And I want to thank the farmers for doing a really hard job. It's, you know, I think most of us really appreciate it. We know that, you know, we need the food that you grow. We just like to see it being done in a more sustainable manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Krista, you're next, and Ron will follow.
Hi, my name is Krista, and I am a pest control advisor in Fresno County. I'm also a mother of 2 small toddlers, and I am 100% on board with us making sure that pesticides are being used properly. That is my entire job. And I've gone to extensive education in order to be a professional in this area. My main concern with this regulation is that we are essentially not looking at what DPR has already done to make sure pesticides are safe. To me, this seems like what we need is more education on what DPR and EPA already do in order to make sure that these pesticides are used safely. Pesticides are going through an intensive, rigorous process of regulation and certification, and we have extremely extensive measures that we take in order to spray these materials safely. So if the community needs more information on how pesticides work and the decades of research behind receiving registration, maybe DPR can provide support in that regard in order to protect the state's constituents by showing that we've already done the work to prove that these are safe. And providing a text message with a chemical name to the constituents of the area, as someone already previously stated, is not going to actually help anyone because no one understands how these products work or if they are harmful at all. You're just going to get a name. If something kind of like BT comes across your phone, you may feel, oh, that's terrifying. But really, it's just a bacteria that kills worms. It doesn't have any effect on anything else. So I think extensive education on what is already being done should be where this money is being placed, as well as updating the systems that we currently have with the county and with DPR. None of our systems that we utilize are really automated very much in any way. So it's unrealistic to believe that there is any way growers could be able to make this leap to automated reporting, because we don't already have that in an easy to use way. So
Thanks. If you could wrap in a few seconds, that'd
I
be
think
great.
to touch on your principles, my concern is, where is the commitment to equity for growers and for our agricultural community? So I would love to see us put these funds to another place. And I think that if we want to keep California agriculture alive, we need to stop overregulating what we are already doing, because we already have done the work and there's science there to back up what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ron is up, followed by Maya, and we are running short on time. So if everybody could keep it brief, that would really be appreciated. Thank you.
My name is Ron Whitehurst. I'm a pest control advisor working for a beneficial insectary. So I'm specialized in biological control. So I know from my day-to-day experience that we don't need any toxic pesticides to grow our food, fiber, and medicine. The guiding principles are a good start, but what's the context? Robert Vanden Bosch wrote The Pesticide Conspiracy in 1978. And he outlined how the university and extension are basically functioning as marketing arms of the pesticide industry, and that DPR is a captured agency. With a rational pesticide policy, most or probably all of the very toxic pesticides would not have been registered in the first place. DPR is maintaining the status quo, pesticide companies maximizing profit, sales from pesticides. The toxicity studies that have been widely touted as protecting us were done by pesticide companies, so that there's a question of conflict of interest. There are a number of examples of fake studies, so that we don't really know how toxic these materials are. If we were using the precautionary principles, don't take a risk if you don't have to, most of these would not be on the market. Farmers are victims too. They have fallen prey to they've been raised on the myth of better living through toxic chemistry, and that nature is our enemy. So when we see a bug, we have to kill a bug. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and
thank you.
These are not tools for industrial agriculture, but these are biocides that we're poisoning our neighbors with. Thank you.
Thank you. Maya, you're up. We'll be followed by Natalia.
Hello, I'm Maya, and I just wanted to point out and express concern about the time lag between new science and research that's coming out, and the lag between when the conclusions from those studies are reflected on labels and protocols that are used by farmers regarding pesticides. Because there's such a long lag because of bureaucracy and protocols and stuff like that, it would kind of behoove us to take this as an urgent matter, because, as we've seen, there's new studies in 2020 and 2021 about links to cancer and chronic exposure to pesticides. And also in terms of soil health, it also damages the soil. There's a study, Pesticides and Soil Invertebrates, a hazard assessment from 2021, and we're learning still the risks of pesticides. I think it'd be good to do advance notice and also just stick it on a California website. If people don't want their phones blowing up with text messages, there should be something on a website that's easily accessible to the public. That, what if you travel to another city? You might want to check what's going on in that city. And in terms of fear mongering, I would think that, doubling down on practice of non-transparency, on labeling any request for improvements or advance notice as demonizing somebody, that itself increases fear, doubt, suspicion, and more fear mongering. So I encourage DPR
to wrap, please.
I encourage DPR to adhere by the guidelines at minimum, and as much as possible move to a sustainable agricultural system, because pesticides harm not only humans but in the area, as well as due to wind nearby, as well as soil and future crops. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Natalia, you're up. You're muted.
Ready?
I can hear you now.
Hello, can you hear me? Great, thank you. Yes, my name is Natalia Deep Sosa. I'm a professor of Chicano Studies at UC Davis. And my work is with farm workers such as Ale and Horacio. And I am a little bit concerned about the rhetoric that seems to pit farm workers against farmers, because their shared interests. This is about the health of both farm workers and farmers. And I think that, so I am here to say that, I believe that there should be a fully transparent system without any signups, especially because a lot of the farm workers I work with, and I might not speak English, or they might not have documentation. Also, I don't think it should be around the area, because many of them travel several hours. And I think the deadline, as many have expressed, of 2024 is really too long, especially because the Department of Pesticide Regulation already has notices of intent. So like, come on, like do it right away. And it should be in multiple languages, and at least 72 hours, because as we heard from Ale, like this really shapes their health behaviors. How are they taking care of their young, of their children, of themselves? And about the fear mongering, that's why I believe it should be community led. There should be engagement and accountability. How do they want this system? What kind of information do they need? Not just the name of the pesticides, but what other kind of information would be useful so that they can keep their families safe? Thank you very much for allowing me to do this comment.
Thank you. And we're running a little bit tight on time. We're going to see if we can go a few minutes to squeeze everybody in real quickly. But Josh, if we could put up, I'm just going to let people know, in case people have to leave right at 11:27, that we do have a survey. There'll be a link in the chat box and a QR code to scan. It's a really quick 4-question survey. We'd appreciate it if you could fill it out by this Friday to help us improve these workshops and improve these webinars and plan the workshops going forward. Okay, so with that, let's quickly move to John.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. My name is John Botter with cleanupforkids.org. I just want to say that farmers are not the issue. It is pesticide manufacturers and regulators. The pesticide industry does not want communication or education, since people won't want to buy or use products that are poisoning people. And regulators are held back by politics and lack of funding for protecting human health. I can't say it loud enough. Legal does not mean safe. Lead arsenate used to be the most widely used pesticide in the US. That's lead and arsenic, two of the most toxic substances in the world. And it was replaced by DDT. And we know how that all ended up. Today, there is substantial evidence that pesticide applicators have increased risk of cancer and other health issues. People need to know that. They need to know farmers are poisoning themselves to grow our food. And there are children as young as 12 who are legally allowed to work in farms. They are also being exposed. This is a justice issue, as most workers are in the fields are low-income people of color, and they don't know these risks. They don't know this information. For how the industry makes sure their products are approved without proper testing, I would encourage everyone to look at the EPA Exposed series by The Intercept. For example, the EPA's pesticide office approved 89% of the 972 industry requests to waive toxicity tests between 2011 and 2018. The US only bans 15 pesticides. China bans 51. China bans more pesticides than the US. We have to make manufacturers prove their products are safe before they are used, not the other way around. Again, legal does not mean safe. Pesticides do not
could
go through
please
rigorous
wrap,
testing.
everyone.
Okay, sorry. The fact is we would have a lot less pesticides if those products had to go through the same toxicology and testing protocols as medications. Agencies have to hold these chemicals to proper testing, and they need to help farmers transition to non-toxic pest management methods. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine, you're next, followed by Manuel. You're muted. If you could make it quick, I believe you might have already had a chance to speak, if I'm not mistaken. You're muted, Catherine. In the interest of time, let's go to Manuel.
I've gotten myself unmuted.
Okay.
Lisa, you're doing a great job facilitating. Thank you for your efforts that you've taken to gather input. I'm an RN with a PhD, and I want to associate myself with the remarks of Mark Weller and Jane Sellen. And I want to point out that someone else said that science is changing. So this is not a static state. I'm a resident of Sonoma County. When I moved here 10 years ago, vineyards were over 4 miles away. In the past 4 years, vineyards have appeared 7 blocks away. 8 years ago, within that 10 years, I was diagnosed with mantle cell lymphoma, one of the lymphomas associated with glyphosate exposure. This issue is a personal one for me, and of course, it's an important issue for those exposed day in and day out working in the fields. I'm glad that public health is a principle, and it's a major concern. Public health includes acute and chronic pulmonary and cardiac illnesses. These are not caused by restricted pesticides necessarily. Pesticides are also in air pollution. Air quality in our counties is often not good. Pesticides do not often include particulate matter that's greater than 2.5, which is associated with long-term lung damage. Asthma requires steroid inhalers, which have a myriad of long-term effects. When kids have asthma, families have to take time off work to get to the emergency department, where they may or may not have to pay for coverage. This causes repeated stress on families and possibly loss of jobs. So this issue of public health goes well beyond the restricted chemicals and what has been associated with cancer. This is about health. Timely information needs to be 48 or 72 hours so people can make plans. Farmers, of course, keep themselves safe because they know what and when they're applying pesticides. This issue of notification fatigue is a ruse. I signed up for all the DPR notifications, and I read some of them and some of them I don't. You can choose. You can set up a system where people don't have to be notified, but can choose to check the public website, the public transparent website when they want to check it. What is the secrecy? I think I'm pleased that you want to prioritize chemicals that impact health. There's no research on chronic long-term exposure or cumulative exposure. And I want to call out that some ag commissioners have been unpleasant to people trying to express concern, and there's no law from preventing them from taking action now. Safety information must be included. I'll end there and submit written comments.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We'll try to squeeze real quickly. Just Manuel, followed by Martinez and Bianca. Real quickly, if you could.
Yeah, Lisa, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Again, thank you very much. Manuel Cunha, president of the Nisei Farmers League based in Fresno, California. First, the guiding principles, I think they are a start. Definitely the agriculture industry does not like to use chemicals at all, only because of the cost and et cetera, et cetera. But when I hear people make comments about China and others that they're not doing any pesticides, absolutely untrue, 100%. But agriculture is greatly concerned. And we're doing everything to notify our workers with education. And I don't like people saying we also represent farm workers. And our growers do one heck of a job through the DPR, through notification. And also IPMs are very important. They're part of the tools in our toolbox that allows the farmers to do this. The small farmers are being eliminated because of the regulatory impediments, not just by pesticides, but by all agencies. So our legislature is killing the small farmers. So when I hear people say we want small farmers, you're killing them because of the stuff you're doing. And to allow horrible pests to live because they need to live, that's insane. Look what we've done with our forest, what the pine beetles have done to our forest and have burnt our forest and have killed endangered species and plus animals and have destroyed properties. So again, we look forward with DPR working with you on your guiding principles. And the notification has to stay within those areas. And we should not be having to contact someone on the moon to know what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Martinez?
Hello, good morning. My name is Yaneli Martinez and I am with the Greenfield Safe Ag, Safe Schools, and I am currently a council member for my beautiful city of Greenfield in Monterey County. I strongly encourage DPR to adopt the following when designing the system. And just to be specific, I know I hear a lot of comments about losing, money, losing crops. I am losing constituents. I am losing little ones younger than 12 years old, and it's because of the lack of notification. So I encourage that we create a fully transparent web-based system available for all, and that it includes at least 72-hour advance notice, and that it also includes various languages, but not limited to Spanish, Mixteco, Zapoteco, and Triqui. And again, I'm specifically talking about my community, the Greenfield community, with a 90% population, majority indigenous community. And again, I am losing constituents as we speak. So that's why I speak up today. And just for the limit of time, I will end my comments now.
Thank you. And the last person that we're going to have time for comments today, I know I see some more hands coming up, but we're going to have to end this one with Bianca as the last comment, and then we'll be turning it over to Director Henderson for some closing remarks. So Bianca?
Hi, good afternoon. Good morning. I wanted to address this comment because we've been dealing with this issue not only since it started the statewide notification, but in Kern County, AB 617, we actually allocated $250,000 for the notification, and yet DPR has not enforced their authority over the Ag Commissioner. That is concerning because if you guys are talking about a statewide notification and yet one county, which is Kern County, is not willing to cooperate in this notification, that is alarming for all the statewide. That is alarming because this is community health. This is community exposure. All the industry is saying that it's going to be harmful. It's not harmful for Kern County actually at the moment. We already have a notification in place, and that is the notification grower to grower. Even DPR brought it up in the last workshop where they used it as an example, but yet here in Kern County, having that money allocated, not waiting that long, being a pilot, the community wants to be a pilot. Everybody's in place, even the city, but yet DPR does not want to enforce their authority over Ag Commissioner, and that is alarming for Ag Commissioners to comply to this regulation, and that is alarming for any other communities. And I want to address it because we're still waiting on Julie to come down and actually enforce this, to come down and enforce it to the community. And I want to know what's her thought about it, because multiple times you said you would be here to support us, but yet nothing has been done, and we're still waiting on the statewide notification to even comply. Thank
you very much. And thank you to everybody for understanding the time constraints that we have today. Do encourage you to email your comments if you didn't get a chance, and also attend tomorrow evening. With that, I'll turn it to Director Henderson for closing remarks.
Thank you, Lisa. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who has taken the time to participate today and share your very thoughtful feedback as we move ahead in developing the system that is very critical to protecting public health in California. Just a couple of comments, and I think that the feedback that's been shared today was also shared in a number of our focus groups earlier. But we do have a robust regulatory process in place and enforcement mechanisms, which we share responsibility responsibility with our local ag commissioners. It is a partnership. DPR oversees the statewide program. I know that there is frustration about the pace of which we're proceeding, but I think that everyone who has been listening today can see that there are multiple factors that we want to make sure that we're thoughtfully considering so that the system that we put in place is effective and serves the purpose of being able to provide people with information that they can take to protect their health. I don't think it's appropriate, given that we have so little time left, to get into the question of what is happening with respect to specific issues in Kern County, other than to say that we at DPR are working closely with our ag commissioner partners. We're also engaged with local supervisors in Kern County and are working to provide a path forward in the context of this statewide notification system for which we've been allocated $10 million to develop. So again, really appreciate all the interest and feedback that we've gotten, and are looking forward to our second webinar tomorrow and receiving public comment, as well as the workshops that we'll be conducting in the early part of next year. And thanks, Lisa Ballin, to you and all of the rest of the folks who've been helping to facilitate today, and to Josh for his presentation earlier, and hope you all have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. We'll adjourn the webinar now. Have a great day.